Welcome back to Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carla and Stan, and we're here with Scott from Keller Williams Legacy. And we had just asked a question before we took a break at how is the sale of divorce real estate different from that of traditional real estate? And Carla and Scott were in there ready to get into that question, and we kind of cut them short. So let's get back to it.
All right, well, I'll jump right in with that. It does have some differences. It's not as easy as the standard typical real estate transaction, of course, but there's certainly opportunity in that, and part of why I started looking into it is from a realtor's perspective. I have to work hard to put money on my table and food in my kid's mouth, but I looked at it as there's a potential right there for 3 transactions. Because you have a couple that's dividing up their home and they're going off in different directions, and chances are they both need someplace else to live. So
that's true.
Here I am. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at it from that regard. So that's where it becomes all that much more important to what we were talking about earlier, where it's about the house. It's not about this side or that side, because through this process, and real estate being a relationship business, you don't want to create enemies. Yeah. So you are treading a lot more diplomatically and a lot more thoughtfully, and you truly are concerned about the house. And so that's probably the biggest difference. The other part is, as we've talked about too, the different professionals that are involved and when to mention or call them in to help smooth things out or clear things out. Mm-hmm. There are other things to be talked about, whether it's with the CPA or other financial professional, for instance, capital gains. If it's a very expensive house, for instance, when a married couple has a capital gains opportunity, I believe it's at $500,000 when they have to start paying capital gains taxes. Well, when it's a single person, it's $250,000. So as you can see, when do you call this a married capital gains or a single capital gains? And there are things that kind of come into play with that, as you see. Also, too, with insurance, make sure that those professionals are in play also, because who was the beneficiary 10 years ago may not be the one that you want tomorrow. So those kinds of things kind of come into the mix.
Yeah, there is a lot to that. So it does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense. What are some of the financial considerations that selling a home during the divorce may be the best option?
Well, we kind of touched on that a little bit, too. We're talking about the children at school and maybe just holding off on that sale if needed. Again, we mentioned if you're upside down in the house, is there an opportunity where perhaps someone can stay? Maybe refinancing at that point could be an option. Yeah. If there's some equity built into the home, then perhaps a refinance and getting those monthly payments down a little bit lower, so one of the partners can stay in the house. So there are those types of
those are all great things. And I think buying and selling, especially selling your home, is emotional. And then being in a divorce situation, it's even, you try and not make it more emotional, but obviously it is.
Right.
So Scott, there's also another, I know you love working with this kind of situation and people being divorced and helping them through that. The other thing that you love is your, we talked about briefly in the beginning, is your historic designation. So tell us about that.
Well, it's not quite a designation yet. There's some heavy involvement. Again, just growing up in the old house and the passion for the old houses, I've kind of immersed myself in that little niche. For a while, I lived out in Castroville, and I chaired the Historic Landmark Commission. It's a city board, and we were instrumental in pulling the guidelines together for taking care of historic properties. And this was actually several years prior to San Antonio's Office of Historic Preservation putting their guidelines together. And there's just such an interesting time learning and understanding and getting immersed in the whole historic property segment. And it's as mentioned, it's the quality, the craftsmanship, the things that you don't see now that made perfectly good sense back then. And the modern power tools and equipment just can't replicate the character and the feel of the materials and the way that they're put together to form what was somebody's old house way back when in the 1800s. So.
That's so true. That's so true. In your bio, it states you regularly volunteer with the San Antonio OHPs, which is the
Office of Historic Preservation.
Yeah.
Again, that's where the passion part is.
Yeah.
Every year, the Office of Historic Preservation, I guess it's been for the past 4 years now, and I've been involved in the past 3, just volunteering for their Historic Homeowners Fair. It used to be held over, I think it was Jefferson, and now it's at the Pearl. We just had one here not too long ago. And the day is just filled with people who are there that are involved in helping to restore and care for historic properties, and they have lots of different lectures talking about the landscaping and finding the history about the houses and teaching people how to put the glaze on the old wooden windows. And it's just a fun time and lots of great information, and you get the opportunity to meet a lot of people who share your passion, and the day goes by quick. It's a fun time.
It is beautiful. Historic areas, those little neighborhoods. And what are some of the best neighborhoods for historic properties?
Well, best, it's kind of a relative term. Some of the bigger, more well-known neighborhoods in San Antonio, for instance, everyone knows King William. And we mentioned Lavaca a little while ago. Monte Vista is very big. And Alta Vista is just across the street from Monte Vista, just across from San Pedro. That's becoming quite an interesting area, too. You have a lot of the old bungalows and some Victorians and just some neat old houses that belong to the working class in San Antonio that basically serviced the wealthy class across San Pedro in Monte Vista. So you can kind of get a sense of what it may have been like 100 years or so ago, and just seeing the difference in the architecture and the difference in the classes just divided by one street. And just imagine what it may have been like growing up during that time.
Yeah, and there's a lot more than architect just involved in looking at some of these homes. And I just want to, if you've just joined us, you're listening to Real Estate Radio SA, or Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carla and Stan, and we can be reached at realestateradio.sa.com. And we're here with Scott, and as you talk about the buildings, I mean, they really are cool the way that they're designed, and you just don't see that craftsmanship anymore around all of the building. But what about the electricity, the wiring and the plumbing? Did I just open up a can of words we want to talk about on a later show or something here?
But we don't have that much time. Well, we do have some very stark differences. For starters, start from the foundation on up. A lot of that was the old pier and beam.
Right.
That was before concrete was really used in any type of production. And the pier and beam, it's basically what it sounds. You have these piers coming up out of the ground that are holding beams that become the first floor of your house. And actually, I think that it's probably easier to maintain and correct a pier and beam than it is a slab foundation. Right. Because first of all, your infrastructure is all underneath there, and it's in a crawl space. You can get to it. It's not poured in the concrete.
It's where the snakes are, right?
If you're looking for them, you'll probably find one, I suppose. But it's really not that difficult to maintain pier and beam. And it still shifts and moves, and every 5 to 6 years you may need to tweak it a little bit, but it's a good, solid, good foundation. The electrical you talked about, a lot of that was the old knob and tube where you had single wires, kind of your positive and negative, running side by side, connected to insulators and running up through the house. That, of course, has been changed to Romex and some other type of more code-compliant electricity. Plumbing, oftentimes that was an afterthought. Some of the older homes, but again, since you're able to go into your crawl space and your pier and beam foundation, you can run your plumbing and put that up through the walls where it needs to be in order to get to where it needs to go.
That's a great point. You forget about that. That's not a slab, but you can get underneath that house to hide that and run it up.
Some pretty cool things on that.
Yeah.
And then some of the other constructions, there's what they call it, this is more down in Lavaca, the shotgun, where the back door, if you open that up, you can look straight out the front door. And you notice, too, that in the older homes, you have the windows that are perfectly lined up with one another from one side of the house to the other. And, of course, prior to air conditioning, that was the way that you cooled your house. So you get that ventilation, get the cross breezes going on. And, of course, this was before crime was such a big factor. People didn't mind leaving their windows open. So.
Yeah. When you look at those homes now and you think, boy, who designed this house? Has no imagination, but it was total imagination that designed that house.
Exactly. Yeah. It was very efficient
for the point.
time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I like that.
Scott, I think you're partly responsible for adding historic property and historic district to the Texas Association of Realtor Seller Disclosures.
Right.
What does that tell me or the buyer?
Well, that came as a result of volunteering at the homeowners fair. There was a lady that's saying these realtors need to know when they're bringing people into a historic district, because some people would come in and
Had no idea.
and they could destroy a historic house. And it just making that as part of the disclosure to help people become aware that you're living in a historic house. You're not really the owner. You're the temporary caretaker. And you need to be able to share this with someone else for the next generation. So don't go messing it up. And so putting that on the disclosure just makes it a little bit more highlighted for that potential buyer.
I think that's awesome. And do they generally put it in the MLS too? Does the
If the realtor is aware,
Right.
then it's definitely a selling feature.
It
There's a certain
is.
market that people are looking for historic properties, and it's definitely a selling feature.
MLS is the multi-listing services.
Right.
And so I know we're getting ready to wrap up our show. And next week, though, I do want to mention we are going to go a little bit deeper into if obviously if people are going through a divorce, we're going to have a divorce attorney to run off of what Scott was saying on his divorce designation. So you want to stay tuned. And we thank Scott Small from Keller Williams Legacy here in San Antonio, and thank him so much for being part of our show. And we're going to have him back.
Well, thank you
Thanks,
for having
Scott.
me. It's
Thanks.
been a pleasure.
Thanks
you.
for coming down.
Bye-bye.